The idea of war between Iran and Israel has been hanging over the Middle East for decades. It's been a constant source of trouble and instability in a region that's already pretty unstable. These two countries, even though they don't share a border, have been fighting a secret war using stand-ins, computer attacks, and hidden operations. This quiet conflict, fueled by different ideas, big plans for power, and old grudges, has almost blown up into a full-scale war many times. And now, what we thought couldn't happen, has. The war everyone feared between Iran and Israel suddenly started on June 13, 2025. The world watched, shocked and quiet, as years of growing tension finally broke, throwing the region into a huge crisis like never before. The first news was scattered and unclear, but it quickly became obvious. A big military fight was happening. Israel surprised everyone by launching a brave and unexpected attack that immediately changed how the conflict was playing out. Spy agencies all over the world rushed to figure out how this planned attack was carried out so precisely and secretly. Being a surprise was definitely a big reason for Israel's first success. In a super carefully planned move, Israel launched a huge surprise attack on many Iranian targets. Lots of fighter jets zoomed across the sky, hitting important buildings, army bases, and key spots deep inside Iran. The attack was bigger and stronger than anything seen before, showing that the fight was getting much worse. The world held its breath, waiting for Iran to strike back, which everyone knew would happen. The attack immediately stopped any peace talks that were happening. Talks between Iran and the US about Iran's nuclear plans, which were already shaky and full of problems, were now completely broken. Any chance of a peaceful solution, no matter how small it seemed before, disappeared in the smoke and flames of Israel's air attacks. The world watched with more and more worry as it became harder to calm things down. The path to talking things out? Gone in an instant. Years of hard work and talks, back and forth diplomacy, and secret messages were all wiped out in one terrible hit. The hope for a peaceful agreement, which was a main goal for countries trying to stop nuclear weapons from spreading in the Middle East, disappeared overnight. The world now faced the scary truth of a possible war across the whole region. This big change happened just one day after President Donald Trump's own 2-month deadline ran out. The deadline was supposed to make a decision happen about the future of the Iran nuclear deal and to deal with worries about Iran's long-range missiles and actions in the area. When this deadline passed, it left a gap, a time of big uncertainty that Israel seemed to use to start its attack. The main problem at the center of the fight was still Iran trying to get nuclear power. Countries around the world have long been worried that Iran's nuclear program, which they say is for peaceful things, could actually be used to make a nuclear bomb. Israel's attack was a clear try to break Iran's nuclear facilities and slow down its nuclear plans, a move that came with huge dangers and possible bad outcomes. In the first few hours of the fight, Israel's army went after important people in the Iranian government. The Israel Defense Forces killed top Iranian generals, which really hurt Iran's ability to lead and control its military. These planned killings were a risky move, meant to make Iran weaker at fighting back, and to cause confusion among its soldiers. The attacks also aimed at killing important nuclear scientists, which made Iran very angry, and led to them speaking out against it. These scientists were seen as super important to Iran's nuclear program, and their deaths really set back the country's plans to make nuclear weapons. Targeting scientists brought up big questions about what's right and wrong, and it made the bad feelings between the two countries even worse. The Israeli Air Force kept hitting nuclear sites and army bases all over Iran without stopping. The attacks were very accurate and caused huge damage, leaving destruction behind them. The goal of the attacks was to break down Iran's nuclear setup, weaken its army, and send a clear message that if they kept trying to get nuclear weapons, they would face quick and strong action. The first round of attacks successfully weakened and destroyed Iran's air defenses, making it easier for more attacks to happen. Fancy radar systems, missile launchers and control centers were all hit, leaving Iran open to more attacks. Breaking down Iran's air defenses was a super important part of Israel's plan, making sure they could control the skies throughout the whole fight. After Israel's attacks, Iran fired back with lots of rockets and missiles towards Israel. Iran's response was quick and strong, showing they were determined to defend themselves and hurt their enemy. The missile attacks made the conflict much more dangerous, bringing the war right to the regular people in both countries. Iranian missiles fell heavily on southern Israel, Tel Aviv, and other big cities, even hitting a hospital, and causing a lot of fear and damage. Attacking places where regular people live was clearly against international rules and made countries all over the world speak out against it. Hitting a hospital was especially awful, showing how cruel and random the fighting was. By the 7th day of the fight, the number of people hurt or killed is already shocking. Sadly, 24 Israelis are dead, and over 800 are hurt, many of them regular people caught in the middle of the fighting. The attacks left a path of sadness and destruction, breaking up families and communities all over the country. The injured were rushed to hospitals, which became too full, pushing their supplies and staff to the limit. But the number of people hurt in Iran was sadly much higher, which shows how strong Israel's attacks were and how weak Iran's buildings and systems were. The damage in Iran was huge, with whole neighborhoods turned to rubble and countless lives lost. The Iranian government struggled to handle the crisis, facing a lot of pressure to protect its people and strike back at Israel. Early reports said more than 224 people died in Iran, and most of them were innocent regular folks. They were men, women, and kids who had nothing to do with the fight, but they paid the highest price. Their deaths were a harsh reminder of how much war costs in human lives and the terrible impact it has on everyday people. Over 1,000 hurt civilians were taken to hospitals, which completely overwhelmed Iran's already busy health system. Hospitals were overflowing with patients who had burns, shrapnel wounds, and other injuries from the attacks. Doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to save lives, but the huge number of injured people made it almost impossible. Most of those hurt were regular people caught in the crossfire, innocent victims of a fight they didn't choose. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, their lives sadly cut short by the violence and destruction of war. Their stories were a strong accusation against the conflict and a plea for peace. But even as the world is sad, the war keeps going. With peace talks shutting down and military actions getting stronger by the hour, a new and even more dangerous time might be coming. What's at stake is getting bigger, not just for Iran and Israel, but for the whole area and how power is balanced around the world. Israel confidently said they had taken control of the air over Iran, effectively ruling the skies and directing how the air war would go. This control of the air allowed Israel to keep attacking with relative ease, further weakening Iran's military and causing a lot of damage to its buildings and systems. However, Iran kept saying this wasn't true, launching occasional missile attacks and trying to mess up Israel's air operations. The main nuclear sites at Natanz and Isfahan, which are super important parts of Iran's nuclear program, were shut down by Israeli attacks. These places were badly damaged, making them unusable and really slowing down Iran's nuclear plans. The attacks on these sites caused big worries about possibly releasing radioactive stuff and the long-term environmental problems from the conflict. The Arak heavy water reactor, another key facility in Iran's nuclear program, was also attacked. This further hurt Iran's ability to make plutonium, which is a main ingredient in nuclear weapons. The damage to the Arak reactor was huge, leading to worries about a possible meltdown and radioactive materials getting into the environment. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IEA, which is the global watchdog group that keeps an eye on Iran's nuclear program, said that almost all the centrifuges at Natanz were destroyed. This was a huge setback for Iran's uranium enrichment program, basically stopping their ability to make enriched uranium, another key ingredient for nuclear weapons. The IAEA asked for immediate access to the damaged facilities to figure out how bad the damage was and what the possible environmental effects could be. The damage done to Iran's nuclear program was shocking, setting back its nuclear plans by years, maybe even decades. The Israeli attacks had pretty much broken down a lot of Iran's nuclear setup, leaving the country with a long and hard road ahead if it wanted to rebuild its nuclear abilities. The future of Iran's nuclear program was still unclear, but one thing was for sure: the conflict had completely changed everything. Back in Washington, President Trump watched what was happening with growing frustration. He had long been a strong critic of Iran's nuclear program and its actions that caused trouble in the region, and he saw the conflict as a chance to put a lot of pressure on the Iranian government. However, he also knew the dangers of a bigger conflict and the chance that the United States could get pulled into a costly and long war. In a series of increasingly aggressive statements, President Trump demanded Iran's complete surrender, insisting that the country give up its nuclear program, stop supporting terrorist groups, and end its troublemaking actions in the region. His demands were met with defiance in Tehran, which made tensions even worse and made a peaceful solution even harder to find. The president openly thought about US military attacks on Iran, which brought up the scary idea of a bigger conflict that could involve the whole region. He talked with his military advisors at the Pentagon, weighing the possible costs and benefits of military action. The chance of US military involvement added another layer of difficulty to the crisis, further increasing tensions and the risk of mistakes. Even with all the strong talk, President Trump insisted that Iran's top leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was not a target. This showed he wanted to avoid a direct fight with the Iranian government. This carefully chosen message was meant to calm things down and leave the door open for a possible diplomatic solution, even if it seemed unlikely at the time. Meanwhile, facing huge pressure both at home and from other countries, Iran was desperate for a ceasefire, looking for a way to stop the terrible attacks and prevent more bloodshed. The Iranian government reached out to different international groups, asking for their help to arrange a ceasefire and find a way to calm down the conflict. Tehran was actively asking the Gulf states to pressure both President Trump and Israel to stop the attacks, hoping that countries in the region could use their influence to end the conflict. The Gulf states, worried about the chance of a bigger regional war, were hesitant to pick a side. At first, there were claims from several sources in the Gulf who told Reuters, June 16, 2025, that Iran offered to make nuclear concessions, including a one-year pause in its uranium enrichment program and full access for the IAEA to its nuclear facilities. However, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said this claim was false, stating that Tehran completely rejected any idea of stopping enrichment in such a situation, and confirmed that keeping enrichment is not up for discussion. Despite growing international pressure and the huge cost of the conflict, Tehran has remained defiant, saying its nuclear program is a sovereign right and a symbol of national strength. And in response, Israel has stepped up its attacks on what it says are key nuclear and military sites, while Iran has promised to strike back with unprecedented force if its main facilities are hit. The conflict, now in its second week, shows no signs of slowing down. Cities on both sides have been bombed, with more and more regular people getting hurt, and important buildings and systems being destroyed. The situation for people is getting worse very quickly, especially in areas near the border, and in cities caught in the fighting. Meanwhile, tensions in the region are getting really high. Groups fighting for Iran, like Hezbollah in Lebanon and armed groups in Iraq and Yemen, have been more active, attacking things connected to Israel and the US. Because of this, Western Navy ships have moved to the Persian Gulf and Eastern Mediterranean, showing they're more ready to step in if the war spreads across borders. Talks between countries are still mostly stuck. Secret talks through Oman and Qatar haven't really helped, and what Washington, Tel Aviv, and Tehran are saying publicly just keeps getting tougher. The words of peace have been replaced by demands and threats, each one making the situation more serious. As the fighting gets worse, world leaders are warning that the region is about to fall into a bigger war, one that could pull in many powerful countries and cause problems far beyond the Middle East. The next few days will be super important, not just for Iran and Israel but for the delicate world order that's watching with more and more worry. But just as the world seemed on the brink of a much wider war, a moment of hesitation emerged. Under heavy pressure from the international community, and facing the growing cost of continued fighting, a ceasefire was announced. The United States brokered a phased halt to hostilities, with both Iran and Israel expected to scale back attacks within 24 hours. Yet on the ground, the situation remains fragile. Sporadic missile launches continue, and trust between the warring sides is nearly non-existent. For now, the guns are quieter, but the war isn't over. The coming hours and days will determine whether this ceasefire holds, or whether the world will once again find itself standing on the edge of a larger, more dangerous conflict. In our next video, we'll dive deeper into the global consequences of this conflict, the shifting alliances, the fragile ceasefire, and the question the whole world is now asking: is this truly the beginning of the end, or just a pause before a wider war? Don't miss it. We'll explore what's really at stake, how major powers are responding, and what this war could mean for the future of the Middle East and global stability. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when it drops. Also, don't forget to like and comment. Your thoughts matter, and your voice helps shape the conversation, as we continue to bring you critical updates from the front lines of this unfolding crisis.